It doesn't give you much warning. There you go. We're live. Hi,
Hello,
everyone.
Kaz.
Happy to introduce Katy Massey. Tell us a little bit about you and your book to get us started.
Well, I used to be a journalist and now I'm a writer. I've never been able to do anything else but write, really, if I'm honest. I haven't had a list of interesting jobs. I've just always written. This, All of Sinners, I'm holding it at the camera now, in case you haven't seen the lovely purple cover, is my first novel. It's a crime novel. It's set in Leeds in 1977. And it's about Maureen, who runs a brothel. And she's running a brothel and trying to keep her women safe while the Yorkshire Ripper is committing his murders. And at the time, the police are clueless, actually, as to what's going on and who's committing these murders and how many of them are linked. And there's a lot of uncertainty. But the story that Maureen and her unofficial partner, who is a policeman called Mick Honeyford, but they are dragged into trying to get some justice for one of the women that works for Maureen when her son is killed. And because of the period and the time that it's in and the fear that's generally on the street, the police are wanting to close the case as soon as possible. And they are committed and increasingly committed to trying to find out what's happened to him.
That's a really good description.
Oh, thank you.
It's quite so we were talking, weren't we, before we went live, about sort of not knowing Leeds at that time. But
yeah,
I think growing up with people who do remember it at that time, it still feels quite recent history.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is in publishing terms, it's historical, but because particularly Peter Sutcliffe cast such a shadow over the events of the late 70s and the early 80s, it does feel more recent. And of course, it's a story that keeps being revisited in the press now. So I think it is, and I think it has resonances for now.
Yeah, and I was like, one of the things I was saying when I bought the book was to my husband, was like, I'm not sure what I feel about reading a book about that sort of touches on that topic, because it's quite hard to, I would imagine, write it and sort of keep it sort of something that everyone can read.
Well, I mean, everyone, I would say everybody over 18. Okay. I think that one thing I didn't realize until the book came out, and it's only been out now for about 5 weeks, so it's not very long, was that there's quite a lot of young people that don't realize that the Yorkshire Ripper is a real thing, is a real person. And I think that's partly because of the recent television series. And I think it's partly because they don't share the general media that we all used to share. Now they get their news from social media. And so I think it's an interesting place to be in. I was talking to a young girl, she actually works in publishing last week, who said, is this a real person? And I said, yes. And she said, well, people need to know about this. And I wanted to say everybody sort of my generation are sort of tired of the rehashing of this story. So I think I no longer assume that everybody knows about the events of that time, but I wanted to write it in such a way that he didn't dominate the narrative. And I wanted it to be very much the women's story in it, who are working as prostitutes, who are coping with loss, who are coping with danger, and they're the people that are struggling in this. And I really wanted their stories to be the focus of it.
Yeah, and I think you definitely succeed with that. I think it adds like a level of foreboding. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Like an extra sort of level of tension to what's happening, doesn't it? And it's like on their minds that they're not safe out at night and things like that. But it's not the key part of the story.
Yeah. I think the lack of safety, I wanted it to be there as a sort of background hum, so that's something that's constantly there. And I wanted to sort of try and draw a parallel with now, that women, as I was writing it, it was Sarah Everard, and women being arrested for protesting about their own lack of safety. So that was really sort of in my mind, that not enough has changed. Actually, it's a long time ago, but not enough has changed.
I think it's a really interesting character study as well, because you've got this group of women that all interact with each other, don't they? And they're all kind of important to the plot. And they're all really real women as well. They're not, nothing about them, like, they're not perfect, are they? They're all
No, they're really not perfect. And I hope that they're real, but I hope they're recognizable. I hope they're the people that you might have known growing up, or they're an auntie, or that's how I wanted to write them. I wanted to write them flawed, but coping and brave and admirable in a strange way. Yeah, I've read some reviews that have said, despite the squalid setting of this book, and because of the way I grew up, it's really informed by my mum's own running of a brothel in Leeds and writing about that. So because of the way, I don't think of it as particularly squalid, I think, or particularly poor either. So yeah, I think it's what you know, isn't it? That's the thing. They say, write what you know.
Well, there's a very there's certain bits of Leeds, isn't there, that kind of have a reputation.
Definitely they're in this book. Yeah.
people kind of look at you, like, will look at it a certain way.
Yeah, definitely. And I want to, one of the reasons for writing crime, I think, is so that you can take on sort of issues that you've got a bit of an axe to grind about. And one of my things is that the women in this book are constantly under threat of the brothel being closed down and being turfed out onto the street while there's a serial killer on the loose. And it felt unbelievable to me. So that is one of the things I wanted to write about, just that situation. I hope that comes across, that there is a bit of an agenda going on.
Yeah, and the policemen that they interact with, they kind of feel like they're kind of friendly, but they do also have an agenda, don't they?
They really do.
They know that they want them for like a certain thing, and there's a very, like, they're kind of friends, but they're kind of not, like, all the way through, aren't they?
Yeah, no, that's true. And there's a sort of impossibility of a friendship between Mick Hunniford and Maureen, even though they've known each other for years and years and years. He's known her since she was first on the streets, since she was very, very young. And his career has sort of blossomed, and he's got a nice house in the suburbs and a nice wife. But there's a sort of darkness about him, that he is attracted to the edges of life, the margins of existence, and that's where he feels most manly. But yeah, there's a big social gap between them.
Yeah, you play on the social gap a lot in the book, don't you? Like, there's a bit where she goes, because we were talking before we went live, weren't we? That, like, I went to the university, is why I moved back to Leeds. And I really like that you write her going to the university and it's full of posh people.
Yeah.
I'm not posh, and I went there.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've got to say, I think it still is. Like, I think significant numbers of the cast of Made in Chelsea went to Leeds, but it's a big university, isn't it? But back in the day, it wasn't. I was surprised at how much smaller it was, and how far fewer people had the opportunity to go to university, and because of that, the social echelon is less what's the word, diverse, let's say. But I like writing that sort of clash of class, if you like. I do like writing it. I enjoyed it. But actually, even though I'm trying not to give anything away, it's hard, isn't it, Kaz?
Well, it's really hard to not give away spoilers, isn't it?
I would say that even the characters, at least one of them that she meets at the university, they're not safe. This book is about not being safe and not being secure. And their extra money and their nice upbringing doesn't really help, at least one of them. No,
it really doesn't.
No.
But it was like scenes like that I really enjoyed. There's another one where they go to a club in Manchester.
Oh yeah,
Your author notes at the back, because that was a real place, wasn't it?
it was the Reno. Yes, yeah, and I really loved writing that, but it was partly I loved writing it because I wasn't old. I'm not old enough to have gone there. So as I was reading about this place, and if you Google it, like people are really, really affectionate about it. And there's been, community history projects done about it, and it's remembered really, really fondly. And I kind of fell in love a bit. I was a bit like, no, I wish I could have gone there. So it came alive in my imagination, and I so enjoyed writing about it. That yeah, but I hope I didn't spend too long writing about it, actually, because it's easy to get carried away. The things I can't really take these off because I won't be able to see you, but I'm trying to avoid just seeing my computer and my glasses. It's easy to get carried away on the bits that you like. And you've got to remember a novel requires balance.
So this is your first fiction book?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Would you, because I feel like there's more we can find about these characters. Are you planning it to be a series? Will we get another one with Maureen?
You're definitely going to get one more, because I've nearly finished the first draft of it. I've got to admit, I'm not tired of them. I thought I might be tired of them, because the process of writing and editing and all of that takes a long time. And particularly with the first book, because I've never done it before. so every stage, it took me ages. And at every stage, I was sort of phoning the publisher and saying, what do I do? I don't know what to do now. So hopefully the next one the production won't take as long. But when I started writing the second book, I found that there was quite rich pickings. I wasn't tired at all. I wasn't tired of the settings. I wasn't tired of the pub, the fiddlers. It was just, Linford's Cafe. The places are quite rich. And they're places where, because they're social spaces, and the brothel is a social space as well, you can introduce interesting new characters and not have to work tremendously hard to do so. It feels feasible. And I've got to say now that my book it aims to be realistic. It's not a book where there are I don't know, letters from aunts that are suddenly found 2/3 of the way through, or there aren't. I try and avoid that sort of device as much as possible, because I want every plot turn and every development in the story to feel like it could happen. I don't know. What do you think, Kaz? Has that worked, or maybe not?
Worked for me.
Oh, brilliant. Good. That's good. Yeah, because sometimes it's very tempting to just have a phone call, or somebody to remember something. And you sort of try to, if those things happen, then you try to, or at least I've tried to make it as just emerging as much from the characters as possible. And I think that's made the next one easier to write in a strange way, because the characters, they've already shown me a lot. They've already done a lot.
We've got some hellos. We've got some hellos from Sam and like Sarah and Karen. Sarah,
hello.
Sarah wants to know how you decided on writing this book.
So I published a memoir in 2020 that was partly about growing up in the sex industry. It was also about my father and being brown and Leeds and lots of other things. And after writing that, I sort of cast around. I didn't really know what I wanted to write. It's not really feasible to write another memoir. And I'd never written fiction. So I thought genre fiction would be a good place to explore the themes and characters I wanted to explore. And my agent encouraged me a lot, read a lot of drafts until I learned how to write a novel, which took a while, but she was really good. My agent is Jo Unwin, and she's been really great. And between her and my editor at Sevilla, we managed to produce something.
Well, yeah, you should be proud of what you produced.
I feel like I should say this is the fifth novel I've written, and I have four in a drawer somewhere. But I'm quite slow, in fact, and I realise in the crime world I'm very slow. So that's another ambition. I'm going to try and speed up a bit. But I yeah, first book, slowly, and when I first started writing it, I didn't know what I was writing really. I was just writing the characters, and I sent about 20,000 words or 30,000 words to my agent, and she said, "It's lovely, Katy, but nothing happens." So then I had to go back and make things happen. So that's how it came about.
I think it's quite nice to have a sympathetic look at sort of women who've chosen to work in that industry.
Yeah.
You've got they've chosen to do it for like real reasons, and
yes,
you know,
yeah, and they're not
sugarcoating it, but you're not making them like, you know, a particular stereotype either.
Yeah, tart with the heart. I realized when I started to read around though that there was just, for me, there were too many women, and not just working girls, but often there were prostitutes, but too many women dead in the first chapter. And I was just like, but I want to hear about this woman. I wanted to know more backstory than the investigation often allowed. So that by making a victim somebody's child, you can learn that backstory through their grief. So that was one of the sort of making these women more real within the genre was a big motivation.
You're showing off quite a lot of areas of Leeds that probably don't get a lot of writing about as well.
Well, you know, like it's really strange because Leeds, the centre of Leeds, has become so much bigger. So, you know, like the area around Leeds Bridge is really busy with clubs and pubs. And then looking at old photographs, and I was thinking to myself, nobody ever went out down like where the River Aire is. Nobody ever went out down there. And when I looked back at old photographs, it's still factories. So it's interesting to sort of look back at what a city used to be like, and a much smaller town centre and a much less built up hinterland around the town centre, like a real no man's land. I remember getting the bus into town when I was a kid, and you sort of left the suburbs, and then there was a sort of no man's land of factories and car showrooms, and you know, still bomb sites, still undeveloped areas. Before you got to the bright lights of Briggate. So it's changed a lot, and it was a joy actually to uncover that change. I'm writing about partly about an old cinema at the moment in the new one, and that's been fascinating uncovering that. It's really interesting. I've really enjoyed it.
What old cinema are you writing about?
So it was called the Rialto. So, and it shut, I think, if my memory serves, it shut in the 70s. But sorry, no, not the 70s. It must have been after that. I can't remember when it shut. Somebody's done a website where they've got all the lost cinemas of Leeds marked on it. And there were so many cinemas. It's like dance halls. There used to be loads of dance halls as well. And it's nice to bring these places to life again. And as I say, social spaces are really, really sort of rich, you know.
It's true, since I've moved back to Leeds, the cinema that I went on the first date with my husband to is now completely shut. It's just a shop.
Oh, which one was that?
Oh, it's the Odeon. Used to be, there was an Odeon on like the Head Road.
Oh yeah, the top of town. Yeah, beyond where the Grand Theatre is, right at the top there.
No, that was another one, but that's gone as well. It was at the end of that road where the Grand Theatre was. And then,
am I thinking of the ABC? That might be before your time, actually.
No, the ABC was still there as well, but that's fun as well. And it's like depressing. You go to like the museum and you can still see pictures of it. You're like,
wow, yeah, and well, the Cottage Road, does that still exist?
Yeah, you can still go to the Cottage Road.
Oh well, I'm pleased the Cottage Road and Hyde Park still exist, but I was devastated when the Lounge Cinema shut down in Headingley, because that was my local flea pit as I was growing up down the road in Kirkstall. It's amazing, isn't it? that a number of social spaces we have, and the pubs that are closing, they're getting smaller and smaller, even while it feels like there's a coffee shop on every corner. It's incredible.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's still as many cafes like Reginald's one, because you read that and it's like I can think of hundreds of places growing up in Leeds that were like.
Well, it's Linford's on Reginald Terrace. Yeah, the greasy spoons. What's happened to the greasy spoon? I know.
Cafes like that, weren't there? You can think of like ones that you went past as a kid, or
yeah. I know. They're slightly coming back in Brighton. Actually, I think there's a lot of bougie coffee shops and very smart brunch spots. But the old-fashioned cafe is edging its way back in, actually, and I'm not surprised. I think some people just want cooked food as opposed to pastry. So yeah, but no, it's I was never somebody. My partner is a real history buff. I was never somebody who was that taken by the past until I started this process of writing these books.
Well, I mean, it must have, because you obviously weren't alive at that time.
No. Well, no, I was alive. I was just very young.
Growing up in Leeds, in that, the early kind of beginning of the 80s and whatever, you will know, you will have some memories that you could work on to.
Yeah, oh, definitely. And you grow up with the memories of the people around you as well. So you don't grow up in a bubble. There's this thing that sometimes period dramas do, particularly on the television, when everything's too perfect, because in a 1970 living room there'll be nothing from the 50s or the 40s, and that's not how most people live. Most people live with a combination of the past, and so I like having older characters, actually, because you can do that. You can talk about the environment that they remember, and they're still my character's parents, they're still their relatives. You live with the past. And I remember such strong memories of things set in the war, war movies, and It Ain't Our Hot Mum, and what's it called, Dad's Army, and these things, and they were all there for people who remembered the war, but I was watching them as a very small child. So I think we're all sort of, we have one foot in the past, don't we?
We do. And I wonder, because you use quite a lot of sort of Leeds slang in it as well, don't you? I wonder how people who read it who aren't from Yorkshire kind of manage with that. Have you had any kind of feedback on that? Or
I did.
Words I didn't know.
Oh, really? Oh, I wish I knew which ones. I had feedback from my publisher. The blacksmith who runs the stable. That he's kind of got the most old-fashioned broad Yorkshire accent, and I was asked to tone that down, which I sort of did, actually. I'm glad I did now, because yes, I've had quite a lot of, oh my Lord, this is such a northern book. Whereas for me, it's just the way people speak. So, and sort of older people speaking with a stronger accent as well. And you get that down here. You get it in Sussex, in that the Sussex accent has become, among younger people, a bit like a sort of London estuary accent. But if you talk to somebody much older, they speak with a proper old-fashioned Sussex accent. So that I sort of wanted to show that in the book. But yeah, I did get told to, a little is a lot sometimes. But that, it was really only in dialogue. It was not in the description or the my sort of narrative voice.
It captures the feel that I lived in Leeds in the 80s. And bits of growing up that I can sort of remember, it was, I was like, yeah, I remember bits of Leeds being like this, or.
Oh, good. Yeah. Because, I still remember in bomb sites. I mean, that's true. There was a lot of, Leeds has been economically really successful, hasn't it? But there was a lot of it that just was flattened. It just wasn't developed. And it feels now like the whole area around the station, where Granary Wharf and all that is, it just, they weren't places where you would walk unless you were up to no good. Unless you wanted to be somewhere where there was very little street lighting and nobody knew what you were doing. And of course, then there was no CCTV. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad that you recognize that, though. That's really nice, because there's probably space to write about. I don't know whether anybody actually has set a novel in bright, shiny new Leeds. I'd be surprised if there hasn't, because the graduates from there, you would imagine somebody would have written that. But I think there's definitely a space to remember the sort of post-industrial devastation of the North. And it was real. It was a real thing.
There are crime writers who write books set in Leeds.
Oh, yes, I know. But are they writing about current Leeds?
I think Andy Barrett writes relatively current. I don't know if they're like up to date, but they're more.
Oh, okay. I'm writing that down because I haven't come across him.
Yeah, Andrew. He writes as Andrew Barrett. He's a CSI who works in Leeds.
Oh, yeah.
And his books are all set kind of around here, and they're more modern, but I don't know if they're current day.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll definitely be looking at those. Yeah, it'd be interesting. It's just it's interesting to see another writer's take, and the same environment. Yeah, it's interesting.
It is, and I think I mean, there is a thing, isn't there, of reading books of somewhere that you know well, because you feel familiar with the locations and.
Oh, definitely. I've just read Araminta Hall's latest one. The Good Guys, one of the good ones, I think. And that's set on the Sussex coast, and it's lovely to read it, actually, because when there's a lot of it's water crashing, cliffs crumbling, there's a lot of atmosphere, and I love that. It sort of brings it alive in your mind, doesn't it?
How I quite like how you write the clients who come into the brothel as well.
Thank you.
Some of them who visit, like the doctor.
Oh yeah.
Just like brilliant little characters. Like they're so full of like, they feel like a genuine main story character.
Oh, brilliant!
Just kind of like a side.
Yeah. It was quite important for me to write some punters, because whenever anybody talks about the sex industry, they always talk about women, and you're sort of occasionally, sometimes there's a sort of male porn star or something that people talk about, but mainly it's seen as a sort of women's thing, and you're like, well, it's not really, is it? It's a business that's there for another gender. So it was quite important to me to not sugarcoat it, not problematize them, but people, to be genuinely lonely sometimes, or want to talk, or these sort of human interactions. Because I mean, it's not like I pretend that sex isn't happening, but I think there's a privacy to that, whereas there's a community to the brothel itself. And I sort of wanted to write it in that way.
Agreed. It's not focused on that, like on there, is it? It's more focused on the community of the people.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, it's hard to write because I wanted Peter Sutcliffe to be in the background, and it was quite hard for him not to sort of drown out everything. It's such a massive story, and it's such a massive thing, deservedly so. But it was hard on to just be making references, or to be writing a scene of crime scene, and to still keep that community central. I think that was important to me.
Well, that's why I was surprised when you were saying that people didn't know he exists. I guess because I grew up I don't remember it happening, but my dad was like working back in Leeds, and he knows people who got stopped because they had kind of a Geordie accent.
Oh yeah.
In the van, and you hear those stories. My husband's from Hull, and his parents live in Leeds, around the time, and I've got a story. So I've grown up with those stories of and like you could know the places where the victims were found.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just kind of common knowledge here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it still feels like a really recent thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't think you'd find someone in Leeds who didn't know that he was a real person.
No. When I expressed surprise to this young woman who'd never heard of him, she said, "I was born in 1997," which nearly killed me. And it's easy, as I say, it's easy to assume that just everybody knows. And I was shocked that the sort of, and she works in publishing, so I imagine that there's a generation that just don't really, and also the TV drama. Did you watch The Long Shadow? No, I didn't watch much of it, I've got to say, but mainly because it's a bit of a busman's holiday for me. I'd spent a lot of time researching and reading about the Ripper. It was sort of a, again, using the same sources as well. So I should maybe have a look actually. I'm saying I should have watched it really. But when something is adapted like that, I think it appears as fiction to a lot of people. They would have to read the description. Do you see what I mean? To find out that it's based on truth and things. So I think the story is well on its way to becoming legend, is kind of what I'm trying to say. Like the Krays. Like you could have heard of the Kray twins and think, oh, is that are they real people or are they, like film characters? So yeah, I think it's like that.
The Moors murderers. That was the other one that kind of shadowed over.
Oh gosh, yes. And that's another story that keeps coming back, doesn't it? Because the surviving parents and I'm not sure. That feels like a Manchester thing to me. I'm not sure whether I would have the brass neck to be writing about that actually, because it feels like a Lancashire, other side of the Pennines. Mind you, the arena's in Manchester, isn't it? I didn't mind about that.
No, and I thought that was interesting that they would drive that way, because there is a nightlife scene, isn't there? There's quite a vibrant nightlife scene.
Yeah, what in Leeds?
So they've driven over to Manchester to go to a nightclub.
Yeah, because it's mixed race. That's why people travelled. So it was a place where, and Maureen clearly thinks of it. Oh, it's a place where I can take this chap, and we're not going to get any trouble. And also, she's sort of a bit of a queen there as well, historically. She spent a lot of time there. So, but people did travel, incredibly. And it feels weird now, doesn't it? But I remember, I do remember traveling a long way. I mean, I remember going out in Liverpool from Leeds, which is fabulous. I know, like 2 hours on a coach to go out in Liverpool. Yeah, but I don't know. You're young, aren't you? And you've got plenty of time. No longer.
Well, you don't feel young. All the places I used to go out to in Leeds are shut as well. I think
this is what happens.
They don't exist anymore.
Yeah. Oh well, I was in the days of the Phonographique. Where else did we used to go? Oh, Ritzy and Central Park. I mean, all these places have gone years ago. Yeah. So I mean, it is incredible, isn't it? Yeah.
So what moving on from into the second book, what can you tell us about what you're writing?
Wow, very little. I can tell you very little. It involves a local MP. It's probably it's more about the closed worlds. Because the brothel is great to write about. Rio's is great to write about because it's a closed and intriguing world. And I've sort of invented another closed and intriguing world in the next book for Maureen and Mick to sort of infiltrate and to investigate. And I've enjoyed doing that, actually. And one of the things that struck me when I was writing this was that, everybody exists so closely together. Like Rio's exists so closely to a sandwich shop, so closely to, the Nick is only a mile or so into town. And you can really go through your whole lives ignoring the bits of a city that you don't want to see. And I think it's interesting to sort of have your characters have to look at things they don't necessarily want to look at, or to go places they wouldn't necessarily want to go. So I'm doing a bit more of that. I haven't told you very much, have I?
No. Are you going to dip into other areas at least? Because I feel like you've got like the area around Reginald Terrace.
Yeah.
And you've got bits of town in this one.
Yeah.
You go vaguely to the uni, don't you?
Yeah.
And I think there's like something dodgy happens in Hunslet.
Yeah.
But would you be tempted to go to like other?
Oh, I mean, I go as far as Wetherby in the next book. I'm going out to Wetherby, so which used to literally be a day out for us. So yes, I'm going to Roundhay. We go to Wetherby. Yeah, a lot happens in the centre of town actually, because this closed world I'm talking about as its headquarters in the centre of town. There's more coppers in this one. Weirdly, there's more police action. Yeah. So, but I would say, yeah, we might even go as far as Harrogate, Kaz.
Oh wow!
If you're good. I know.
You quite you sort of touch because Maureen's starting to make a relationship, isn't she? Like a more formal relationship.
Yeah.
By the end of the book.
Yeah.
And you sort of talk about their kind of attitude to women like her.
Yeah.
In the book, don't you? So I'm wondering how that's gonna like go on, if you know what I mean, because I thought that was quite interesting.
Ah, good. I'm glad you did. I think she's been through a lot, hasn't she, by the end? So there's a sort of period of reflection, let's put it like that, and to sort of getting herself back together. But then once she does, then she goes great guns into this new world, because for her, investigating is really an escape from the box she's been put in. It's not just being a brass who runs a brothel. It gives her a way of exercising her brain, because she's an intelligent woman, and she's got a business that sort of ticks over. So she has a bit of freedom to become more than she was, or more than she thought she ever could be. And I've really enjoyed pushing that journey. Actually, it's been good. Yeah, but I mean, she's not quite joining up though.
No. I think it's interesting how you sort of get her story from, like, she's got this kind of troubled past.
Yeah,
but she's managed to, like, you can see the intelligence and that she's made something of herself.
Yeah. Good.
It is her business. She does know what she's talking about. She's very in control of that business.
Yeah.
You know, and then she's stretching out and being an investigator as well. She has got a lot to.
Yeah, and she's got quite a lot to prove. You know, people think nothing of her. One of the characters I right enjoyed. Sorry, I didn't know what that was then over my shoulder. It's my lamp. One of the characters that I really enjoyed writing was Eileen, who runs the pub with her husband, the pub that the locals go to, and because she's one of these people that she sort of typifies the people's attitude to Maureen, which is a sort of grudging respect, but at the same time looking down on her. And I enjoy writing that because I think Maureen has got. If you said to her you've got a lot to prove, she'd say, no, I haven't. I've got nothing to prove. I don't care what folk around here think. But she does, underneath it all. She really does. So she's got a lot to prove to herself. You know, she has no family really. So the girls at Rio's, some of the punters, Mick, they all, Linford especially, actually, all form this sort of surrogate family around her, and she does want to prove herself to them really, deep down.
Yeah, is the Fiddlers and like Linford's Cafe, were they real places or?
No, I wish they were. No, but I've just made them up entirely, and they're sort of, again, it's a bit like the Reno. They're sort of the places that I would have gone to or would have liked to go to in a weird way. So, Fiddlers is a very down market version of the Cheers pub, where everybody knows one another, and it's just much less friendly. and much more judgmental. And Linford is just a little greasy spoon, which is comfortable and cozy, even though his food's quite terrible. So, but they're just invented places. This is, you can tell, can't you, that I was writing quite a lot during lockdown. So I was writing these sort of dream venues, and then my imagination doesn't, my imagination seems not to stretch to the Ritz. So, so they're the places you've got.
You said his food's terrible, and I remember the description of the bacon sandwich that
yeah, yeah, that's it, disgusting. But he's so mean, you see. If he was less mean, his food would be good, and when he cooks Jamaican food, it's good. But when his food in the cafe is just sort of uniformly bad. And it's just one of those little jokes. It's nice to have these things, to return to as well. It's nice to write him cooking something or taking something around to somebody's house. They're nice things. It can't be all. It's like having some humor is important to me, because it can't be all doom and gloom. It's as simple as that. That's not the way people are made. There's always a little bit of, particularly the people I grew up among, like, you're getting over something by making a joke about it. And it needn't be a sort of big thing, but, sort of treating things with lightness sometimes was important to folk. It showed you were coping. And I try and have that sort of strand running throughout the book. Hopefully you smiled sometimes.
You do, and I was going to say that before when you described it perfectly. I was going to say, I think there is moments. You have like Linford's terrible cooking. You have like other things that happen, and you're like, this is like, the lightness comes through.
Good.
Some of the moments with the customers in the brothel.
Sorry?
Some of the moments with like the customers in the brothel, or them coming out and like looking for the biscuits and things. For me, like the little bits of lightness that came back.
Good. I think when people write about the sex industry, they often have a very sort of heightened attitude. So everything's very, very dramatic all the time. And it's quite often a sort of woman's honor is resting on whatever the event is they're writing about. And I wanted to write about something that was really normalized and quite boring sometimes, and has in a brothel there's a lot of sitting around and just talking. But if you're writing a crime story, that's great. People having time to gossip and chew over. And Maureen's a great character to write, because she can ask questions and go places that policemen, particularly male policemen, just can't. She has, people trust her. They have to have a bit of confidence in her, so they do trust her, and that's a sort of powerful tool that she has.
And she knows the city like the back of her hand, doesn't she, as well?
Yeah,
so she knows,
she does.
And the places and things like that help.
Yeah, she does. She's got, as I say, there's a sort of grudging respect for her, and that she's managed to keep the police off her back mostly, and she's managed to keep gangsters off her back mostly. She's a woman who can handle herself, and that's a good, it's a good blueprint for an investigating character.
It's a good blueprint for just women in general as well,
isn't it?
I feel like Maureen's just someone you want to go and have a cup of tea with.
Yes, and has good stories. Yeah, women telling stories to each other. Like I hate it when people use the word gossip in a negative way. Like, this is how the women I grew up with looked after each other, was talking about other people to each other and saying, oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh, is she all right? Oh, well, this has happened. Should I go around? This is how people looked after one another. It's not like social media where everything was great all the time. And everybody's sort of showing only their best lives. It was like a sort of honest, sometimes it was sort of mawkish and a bit like, people just sticking their nose in for a bit of cheap entertainment. In fact, quite often it was, but also it was a way of caring about people. And I really wanted to share that, actually. It's important to swap stories about what's happened and not just accept what the media tells you.
So moving away from the character, because I could talk to you about those characters for.
Oh, well, thank you. It's lovely to talk to somebody who's read it, you know. It's not been out that long that I've had this conversation very often. So I've done other publicity things, but it's lovely to talk to somebody who's read it and enjoyed it and really thought about it.
Oh, thanks.
Not at all.
One of my favourite questions to ask everyone is just, what have you read recently and enjoyed?
The One of the Good Guys, that's what it's called, by Araminta Hall. I love that, actually, and it was one of those. It's not investigative at all. It's like a sort of I suppose you would call it domestic thriller, except it's not that domestic, really. And it takes in, it's very much about women's safety. It's very much #MeToo. It takes in the media, the police. It takes in the world, the circus around a tragic incident. So I really enjoyed that. I loved Emma Flint's Other Women. Do you know this? It's very good. It's based, and in fact, her books, there's been 2, and they're both based on real cases from the past. The first one was the 1960s, I think, and this one is just after the First World War, when there's a lot of single women hanging around, just a lot of single women, and it's a real case. So you can Google the case if you're interested. But she writes them as novels, and they're absolutely full of suspense. I can't recommend Other Women enough. Actually, it's great. So those are the 2 most recently. It's nice reading again, I've got to say. That's something that's happened since the book came out, is that I've started to read again.
Did you stop reading when you were writing?
Yeah, I partly because I'm a terrible mimic. So if I was reading about some Cockney geezer, I would sit down and start writing Cockney geezers. But also just simply time, family life, writing. There isn't that much time to sort of sit down and really. And when I do read, I'm very intense. I'm like, I've got to finish it. So no, I didn't. I didn't read very much for a couple of years. Actually, I did a sort of self-improvement course where I read a lot of crime all at once, because I was aware that I didn't know enough about the genre, and I didn't know enough about the different types of genre. That's one of the things that happened when I started writing. There were sort of elements of domestic thriller moving into it. I wasn't respecting my genre rules properly, because I was a bit floating all over the place. So I had to read a lot of crime very, very quickly. So apart from that, that's quite a lot of reading actually I've done, isn't it? So apart from that, I hardly read, but that was quite a lot of reading.
Yeah, I don't really know. What would you say yours fits into then as a subgenre of crime?
I mean, I suppose it's investigative, but there's no procedure. I know I don't know because I really haven't found it.
I think you made your own unique.
It's strange because I didn't, as I said, I started out with an axe to grind and a story to tell. I didn't really start out thinking, I'm going to be a crime novelist. It's just that the people I wanted to write about, that's where you find them. That it was never going to be a light rom-com. So it was almost that the genre found me. But I haven't really read anybody that is writing particularly historically like this. But I'm sure we are so many now. But there are so many of us. Can you think of anybody? I'm willing to. I know you've talked to a lot of us, and I know you read a lot. So
yeah, no, I can't. I think partly because, and I'm regretting this, partly because of growing up as a child, with that shadow of the Ripper.
Yeah,
I've kind of generally avoided things about it.
I don't blame you. Yeah,
because I'm like,
I honestly feel the same.
I don't know that I want to read about it.
Yeah,
yeah. Like, I'm regretting that now because I read your book and I was like, this is great.
Oh, well, I mean, there's the whole serial killer thing, isn't there, where somebody's terribly inventive and has all these calling cards, and And I've read a few of those and I absolutely hated them because I found that they glorified the murderer far too much. Though they gave him, I think since Hannibal Lecter, you don't need to do that now, because I think those books did it so brilliantly that you don't need to sort of have somebody, I don't know, outwitting. And it just didn't, it doesn't sit well with me, that kind of book. But because of the period I wanted to write about, and because I wanted to write about women's safety, it was like I couldn't ignore the Ripper in a strange way. It sort of got me. And I didn't enjoy doing the research, actually. I'm telling you all this because I understand the sort of revulsion. And the research, particularly if you go online, people are obsessed and they're really enjoying themselves. You know, they're really enjoying sort of exploring their pet theories and going over and over the injuries. And I just find it, I do find it quite difficult, actually. So I understand why you wouldn't want to go there for fun.
The same time, sort of having family, like I grew up in South Leeds.
Oh yeah.
Kid. My grandparents are from South Leeds. So that's like the area I knew growing up, which isn't the most salubrious of Leeds. Do you know what I mean? But it's like your book, when I was reading it, there were so many people that I knew. Do you know what I mean? From like,
oh, good.
Like it felt like really real to me.
Oh, that honestly, that is so wonderful to hear that from somebody who knows the environment, because it's quite a personal thing, is writing a book. You're sat, well, you're sat on your own for hours and hours at a time, conjuring things out of your own head. And mostly I'm then sending it to London-based publishing people who also don't know the places that I'm writing about. And I mean, my partner read everything several times, bless him, and he does come from the region, so he sort of knows a bit, and he grew up at a similar time as well. But even so, you're never sure that you're getting authenticity and not stereotype.
No, I think yours goes against that, because I think you have an idea of like what the places are like. You know, me and my partner would talk about this a lot after I read your book. You know, like growing up, he's from Hull.
Oh yeah.
So we've both grown up in like bits of, like, I have a Yorkshire kind of, you know, heritage.
Yeah.
We're like, you know, parts of Yorkshire like are not great. You know, parts of Hull have got a bad reputation.
Yeah, definitely.
And we were talking about it, and the fact that like what I saw in your book was like a kind of more real, like you fly against that stereotype. You show the parts of Leeds for what they are, and like the people who are in them for what they are, rather than what people might think that they are.
Yeah, I'm glad you've said that. The one thing they're not is boring. And there's a bit like there's some prejudice against writing about working class areas, that there's some way, oh, it's all a bit poor me another, you know, that it's somehow boring and repetitive. And I never find people surviving and thriving. I just don't find it boring. And I really wanted to show that this is not, people's lives are not to be passed over as if, oh, I've read one, I've read them all, sort of thing. I was, and I'm incredibly lucky with the editor I had, actually, Ed Wood at Sphere, who he's been great. I mean, we don't have anything in common, but he's been so on board with what I'm trying to do. So I'm incredibly fortunate, actually, to have him.
I wonder what the reaction to it is like, because it's been out for 5 weeks. What has other people's reactions been like? Because I would imagine you're going to get a reaction for people who like know the area and know, like things, you know. So you get a reaction from me that will be different to someone who's in London. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. Well, I've had a good press reaction, so I'm very lucky that it's been in like women's magazines, Heat. Like there's something in it that is speaking to people. And I think what most people have picked up on is that it's unusual. Actually, they've said what you said, Kaz, that Maureen's an unusual character, that it's unusual to see a mixture of men, women, different colors, different ages, different religions, just that amount of difference in one place, but written quite naturally. So it's not. I'm not trying to sort of what am I trying to say? I'm not trying to present a United Nations of crime. It's not like everybody's a stereotype of where they're from. It's just people, when you haven't got a lot of money and you can't escape to the suburbs, like Mick has done with Audrey, you have to rub alongside other people, and you have to rub alongside difference, and you have to rub alongside people's professions that you might not appreciate. But there's a man that I wanted to show tolerance. And I think that's an in the sort of rush to portray beautiful couples in beautiful houses that always overlook water in those TV things. They've always got a massive modernist house. In all of that, it's easy to forget that if you live in a terraced house or a small flat above a cafe, you have to put up with your neighbours. You have to put up with your landlord of your local pub. People don't have choices; they just get on with it. And I wanted to show that can be interesting. It can be sexy. It can be entertaining. It can be funny. But most of all, I wanted it to feel real, I think. And people have seen that. I'm very pleased that. I mean, I've had some terrible reviews as well, I've got to say. Not in the press, but I've read, on popular reviewing websites, a couple of shockers. But there's a note of disapproval in some of the reviews that I'm painting these women in a sympathetic light, I think. So yeah, as I said before, I won't call them squalid, for instance, but there you are. I can't do anything about that. You see, if you're reading it and you're finding it to be inappropriate, there's nothing I can do about that because the book's written now.
Well, fair enough. And I think you've written it from a certain place of like understanding.
Yeah.
That shows those women in that light.
Yeah, and I'm trying to be sympathetic. If a reader doesn't agree with me doing that, showing such people in a sympathetic light, then I kind of wonder what they're doing reading it. I don't know why you got to the end, for instance. But I also think, well, that was my intention. If you don't approve, that's fine. That's absolutely your choice. And I'm broad enough minded to see that there might be good reasons for not approving, especially given that many of the punters in my book are married men. I can see that it's not going to be for everyone, Cass. That's the way to put it. Yeah. But it's been enough people have found it as entertaining and interesting.
You have a scene with a taxi driver, don't you, where she knows his dad?
Oh yes, yes.
Like, she politely doesn't tell him that he was a.
That's how she knows him. And there's another bit as well where she's in a place where she could have been easily recognised, and somebody says to her, "Didn't anybody recognise you?" And she went, "Oh no." And a friend says, "Oh no, they wouldn't recognise you. They don't think you ever go to the market to buy sprouts." It's because context is everything, isn't it? And when these women are not selling themselves, they're looking after their families, and they're just at the supermarket. They're at Morrison's like everybody else. It's not, but that's an important weapon that she's got. That's an important investigative weapon, is that she can pass as many different things. And I enjoy that about her. And it's a skill that she's got from her work, is being what people need her to be.
Yeah. You've got about a minute left. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll remind people what they're going to go away and buy. Has there been any media interest in the book?
Magazine,
like a TV adaptation kind
of. Oh well, now and an exclusive for you, there is a media agent on it. So I'm very, I have everything crossed, literally everything crossed, because I would love to see it made into something. And even if, and in fact, I would love to see, even if it wasn't set in the period, I think the story would hold up. So yeah, I love it. And have you heard of Kathy Tyson, BAFTA winning actress? Because she does the Audible version. She reads it, and it's wonderful. So I'd like to recommend that as well.
And then before we finish, just show people what they're going to go away and buy.
This is what you can. It's a very distinctive purple cover. Very purple. You really do notice it as well when it's on those shelves. I mean, the artists and designers at Sphere have absolutely done their job.
Yeah, it leaks out, doesn't it? I found it really easily.
It really does.
Buy it.
Yes, buy it.
Luckily, my Waterstones had coffees in.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
This is Leeds. Is this Central Leeds?
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's good to know. My local Waterstones yesterday didn't have any copies in.
Really?
I wasn't pleased.
No. Well, mine did. So.
Oh, I'm pleased. That's great to know, actually. Yeah. So rush down to your local bookshop.
Yeah, it will be that. And then thank you for joining us. Not
at all, Cass. As I say, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm only just getting used to talking about it rather than it living in my head. So it's a good exercise. It's a good exercise to talk about it. So thanks very much for asking me.
You're very welcome.
All right.